What if I told you your cravings are not proof that you are broken? What if your urge to drink is not a lack of willpower, not a character flaw, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system learned a survival pattern? And what if neuroscience now shows us that learned emotional patterns can actually be updated? Not by forcing yourself, not by fighting cravings every day, not by white-knuckling your way through life, but by accessing the exact emotional memory network underneath the craving, while the brain becomes temporarily open to change. Because this is what most people do not understand. Cravings are not random. Triggers are not random. Emotional reactions are not random. Your brain is constantly making predictions based on past experiences. So when alcohol became linked to relief, safety, escape, confidence, connection, or emotional regulation, your nervous system stored that pattern as important for your survival. That means the craving is not the problem. The craving is the symptom. The real issue is the subconscious prediction underneath it. And after months upon months of studying neuroscience, memory reconsolidation, trauma research, nervous system regulation, emotional learning, behavioral psychology, and the mechanisms behind addiction, I developed a method called NSPR, Neuro-Somatic Pattern Rewire, a process designed to help rewire triggers and cravings at the emotional and nervous system level. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly how it works. I'm going to explain why your nervous system drives cravings, how emotional memories become wired into the brain, what modern neuroscience says about prediction error and memory reconsolidation, why trauma, stress, anxiety, and alcohol cravings are deeply connected, and why traditional approaches often fail, and how NSPR is designed to help update the subconscious emotional patterns driving the addiction. And once you understand this, your entire view of addiction may completely change, like it did for me. Because this is not about shame, this is not about weakness, this is about wiring. And wiring can change. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had one of those days where you feel overwhelmed, stressed, emotionally flooded, anxious, disconnected, angry, rejected, lonely, and suddenly your brain says, just have a drink? Not because you consciously decided alcohol is good for you, but because your nervous system learned alcohol equals relief. Now here's what's fascinating. Your brain does not care about what is healthy. Your survival brain only cares what reduced pain before. So thousands of years ago, if a tiger was chasing a human through the forest, the nervous system would activate instantly. Heart racing, adrenaline pumping, muscles tense, breathing changes, hypervigilance. This is the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, and it evolved to keep you alive. The problem is, your nervous system does not distinguish very well between physical danger and emotional danger. Rejection, embarrassment, failure, conflict, loneliness, shame, abandonment, stress. To the nervous system, emotional pain can feel like danger. So if alcohol once reduced that activation, even temporarily, your brain learned. This helps us survive. And once something gets linked to survival, the brain prioritizes it. That is why cravings can feel so powerful. Because cravings are not just thoughts, they are nervous system predictions. And the more emotionally intensity attached to those experiences, the stronger the wiring becomes. Neurons that fire together wire together. The brain literally strengthens those pathways through repetition. This process involves structures like the amygdala, your emotional alarm system, the hippocampus, which stores contextual memories, the prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking brain, the nucleus accumbens and dopamine system, involved in motivation and reward, as you probably know. When you repeatedly pair emotional relief with alcohol, the brain encodes that relationship, and eventually the trigger alone can activate the craving. You walk into a pub, stress hits, an argument happens, you feel rejected, Friday night arrives, you feel alone, and the nervous system predicts automatically. Alcohol will regulate this state. That prediction creates urges, it creates cravings. Now here's the important part. Most people try to fight the craving consciously. But conscious logic is incredibly weak against emotional survival wiring. Because when the emotional brain activates, the thinking brain partially goes offline. That's why people can know alcohol is destroying their life and still crave it, because the nervous system is prioritizing short-term relief over long-term logic. And this is where NSPR becomes different, because instead of only fighting behavior, we work with the emotional learning underneath it. So most people think memories are stored like files on a computer, right? But neuroscience shows memories are actually dynamic. Every time you reactivate a memory, the brain temporarily reopens it. This process is called memory reconsolidation. Researchers discovered that emotional memories are not permanently fixed. When a memory is reactivated under the right conditions, it can briefly enter a flexible state before being stored again. And during that state, the emotional meaning attached to the memory can be updated. Now, this is still an evolving field of neuroscience, but research around reconsolidation and prediction error has shown extremely promising results in areas involving trauma, fear learning, emotional conditioning, and PTSD. And one of the most important discoveries involves something called prediction error. Prediction error is when the brain expects one outcome but experiences something different. That mismatch appears to help destabilize emotional learning networks and opens the possibility for updating. For example, imagine a person whose nervous system learned, "I can't handle stress without alcohol." That belief is not just intellectual, it is emotional, somatic, meaning the body, nervous system based. So every stressful experience activates the old prediction. Now imagine we safely activate that emotional state in a controlled process while introducing a new emotional experience where the nervous system discovers, I am safe, I can regulate, I can survive this without alcohol. That mismatch matters because the brain expected danger and dysregulation, but instead it experienced safety. And when repeated correctly, the nervous system can begin updating its predictions. This is incredibly important because addiction is often not driven by alcohol itself. It is driven by what alcohol represents emotionally: relief, escape, confidence, connection, numbing, safety, control. And underneath many cravings are subconscious emotional beliefs like, I'm not safe, I can't cope, I'll be rejected, I'll never relax, I'm trapped, I'm not enough. So if you only remove alcohol but never update the emotional program underneath it, the nervous system keeps generating cravings. This is why people relapse, because the emotional wiring stayed intact. Now let's go deeper into the neuroscience. Now I won't go too deep because I know it can be a little bit overwhelming. Because once you understand this, the process makes so much more sense, even if you just can understand a little bit. The nervous system has two major states involved. The sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, activation, stress, urgency, hyperarousal, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is safety, rest and digest, recovery, connection, regulation. This is where you're calm and happy. When people are chronically stressed, traumatized, emotionally overwhelmed, or dysregulated, the nervous system spends excessive time in survival activation in that fight or flight. And alcohol temporarily changes neurochemistry. So if you've watched any of my videos before, you will know that alcohol increases GABA activity. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It slows brain activity and it helps create calming effects. But at the same time, alcohol suppresses glutamate activity. Glutamate is the major excitatory neurotransmitter involved in stimulation and activation. So temporarily, it's very important you understand temporarily, alcohol reduces nervous system intensity. This is why people often say it's the only thing that relaxes me. But over time, the brain adapts. The nervous system compensates. Tolerance develops, and eventually baseline anxiety and dysregulation can increase. Now, dopamine also plays a huge role. Dopamine is not just the pleasure chemical. It is deeply involved in motivation, anticipation, prediction, and learning. The brain releases dopamine when it predicts something important for survival or for reward. So if alcohol repeatedly became linked to relief, the dopamine system starts firing before the drink even happens. That is why cravings can start hours before drinking. The brain predicts the reward. Then adrenaline and cortisol enter the picture. Stress chemicals rise. The nervous system activates. The body feels urgency. And the craving becomes incredibly intense. Believe me, I know. I drank for 25 years. And this is why, if you're struggling with your drinking, you will feel like you're battling yourself. I know I used to feel that way. One part of the brain says, don't drink. This is your conscious mind. But the nervous system says we need relief now. NSPR works by targeting that emotional learning process, not just through thinking, but through emotional activation, nervous system regulation, prediction error, the most important part, and subconscious updating. So what exactly is NSPR? Neuro, Somatic, Pattern, Rewire. It is a guided process designed to help identify and update the subconscious emotional patterns that are driving cravings, triggers, and compulsive behaviors. The process combines memory reconsolidation principles, nervous system regulation, somatic awareness, so body awareness, emotional processing, subconscious pattern identification, predictive brain theory, a process of a guided visualization, hypnotic language patterns, behavioral neuroscience. And before anyone gets nervous, this is completely safe. We are not doing anything invasive. We're not doing anything where we're going into the brain. We're not opening the brain. We're not erasing memories. You are fully conscious and aware the entire time. What we are doing is guiding the nervous system through a structured emotional learning process. So here's what it looks like. First, we identify the trigger, not just the alcohol behavior, the emotional driver underneath it. Then we identify the deeper subconscious belief or emotional prediction connected to that trigger. For example, if I feel rejected, I won't cope. If I feel anxious socially, I need alcohol. If I feel overwhelmed, I need escape. If I stop drinking, I'll lose connection. If I feel this emotion, I'm not safe. Then we safely activate the emotional memory network. This is important because the emotional brain has to actually experience the pattern. You cannot intellectually outthink emotional survival wiring. So we guide the person into visualizing the trigger, feeling the emotions, activating the nervous system just enough not to overwhelm them, not to re-traumatize them, but enough for the emotional learning network to become active. And then at precisely the right moment, we introduce a new emotional experience, a mismatch, a new prediction, a different nervous system outcome. And this creates what researchers call prediction error. The brain expected danger, overwhelm, I can't cope, but instead experiences safety, regulation, capacity, calm. And this is where things start changing. Because when the emotional brain experiences something different while the old pattern is active, the nervous system can begin updating its prediction. Research around memory consolidation suggests that once emotional memory networks are reactivated, there is a temporary window where the emotional learning becomes more flexible before it stabilizes again. It's about a 1 to 6 hour window. Now, obviously, neuroscience is still evolving here, as it always is. But what matters is this. The timing of emotional activation appears incredibly important because if the nervous system is activated too intensely, the brain can stay defensive. But if activation occurs at just the right level while safety, regulation, and new emotional experiences are introduced, the brain becomes more capable of updating the prediction. And that's why I do the entire process with you. I am your safe regulation person. This is why NSPR focuses heavily on regulation. We are not trying to flood the nervous system. We are helping it experience a different outcome. And this is where somatic processing becomes so powerful. Because emotions are not just thoughts, they are body states. Tight chest, racing heart, stomach tension, heat, restlessness, urgency, numbness. The body remembers emotional learning. So during NSPR, we work with both the brain and the nervous system together, not just cognition, because if the body still feels unsafe, the emotional prediction remains active. But when the nervous system starts experiencing safety while the trigger is active, new learning begins forming. And this is why people often say, I suddenly don't react the same way anymore. Because the emotional charge attached to the trigger can reduce, not through force, but through updating the underlying prediction. So most recovery methods, as you probably know, rely heavily on conscious resistance. Don't drink, avoid temptation, avoid people, places and things, distract yourself, fight urges, use discipline, just use more willpower. And while behavioural strategies absolutely matter, they often fail to address the emotional driver underneath the behaviour. That is exhausting. Because if your nervous system still believes alcohol equals survival, you constantly feel internal conflict. NSPR aims to reduce that conflict. Because instead of fighting yourself, we work on updating the underlying emotional association. Think about it like this. Imagine someone gets bitten by a dog as a child. Years later, they may feel fear around dogs automatically, not just the certain breed of dog that bit them, but all dogs, because our brain looks for familiar. So not because they consciously choose fear, but because the nervous system learned. Dogs equal danger. Now, if that emotional learning became updated through new experiences, the nervous system stops reacting as intensely. That is emotional learning. Addiction works the same. The nervous system learned alcohol equals safety. NSPR works to update that prediction. And when the nervous system genuinely starts believing, I can regulate, I can cope, I am safe, I can survive emotions without alcohol, the cravings often stop feeling like emergencies. That changes everything. Now, here is something that most people underestimate. Your subconscious mind runs the majority of your automatic behaviors, habits, emotional reactions, triggers, protective responses, conditioned patterns, and the subconscious communicates emotionally and symbolically, not logically. That is why people can consciously want to stop drinking while emotionally feeling pulled toward it. You know how that feels, I'm guessing? Two different systems are operating. The conscious mind says, I want to change. The emotional brain says, we still need this. This is also why hypnotic language can be powerful when used ethically and responsibly, because hypnotic communication helps bypass excessive analytical resistance and speak more directly to emotional learning systems, the subconscious mind. Now, I know when people hear the word hypnosis, they imagine mind control. That is not what it is. You are fully aware. You are fully conscious. Hypnotic language simply helps create focused attention, emotional engagement, imagery, and deeper nervous system responsiveness. And neuroscience shows the brain responds strongly to imagery and emotional imagination. Your nervous system can react to imagined experiences almost as if they are real. That is why your heart races during a scary movie. That is why you feel anxious thinking about a future conversation. The brain predicts emotionally. And this is exactly why guided visualization can be so powerful within reconsolidation-based approaches, because we are working with emotional prediction systems. Now, this next part is incredibly important. Your brain is always generating predictions. In neuroscience, this is often described as predictive processing. The brain constantly predicts what's going to happen next based on past experiences. If someone deeply believes, I can't cope without alcohol, the nervous system reacts accordingly. But if emotional learning updates and the person begins deeply experiencing, I am capable, I am safe, I can regulate, I can survive this, the nervous system begins generating different responses. Beliefs shape biology, not because it's magic, but because belief influences predictions, attention, stress responses, neurotransmitter activity, behavior, and emotional physiology. This is why expectation has measurable effects in neuroscience and medicine. The brain responds to meaning, and when someone genuinely starts experiencing a new emotional reality, the nervous system follows. That's why I focus so heavily on emotional certainty, safety, and subconscious change during NSPR, because the nervous system changes fastest when the experience feels real. So what excites me most about this work is that it offers hope, because so many people have spent years believing they're broken. They think, why do I keep doing this? Why can't I stop drinking? Why do I still crave it? What's wrong with me? Especially for the people who have lost everything. But once you understand the nervous system, everything changes. Your brain adapted, it learned, and learned patterns can be updated. Modern reconsolidation research has opened fascinating conversations in neuroscience around emotional memory updating, fear conditioning, and trauma treatment. Now, to be very clear, this is still an emerging field. There is still more research needed, as always in this type of field. And no ethical practitioner should promise miracle cures. But the results people are experiencing with reconsolidation-based approaches in trauma work, emotional learning, and behavioural change are incredibly promising, like incredible. And what I have done is adapt these principles specifically towards cravings, addiction triggers, and nervous system regulation. Because alcohol addiction is not just about the alcohol, it's about the emotional survival pattern underneath. And when those emotional patterns begin changing, behaviour often changes naturally. So many people describe cravings feeling quieter, triggers losing intensity, emotional situations being more manageable, less urgency around alcohol, greater nervous system regulation, feeling calmer in situations that previously caused spiraling, feeling emotionally lighter, less internal conflict, and perhaps most importantly, they stop feeling broken because they realize, my nervous system learned this. And that realization alone can remove enormous shame. So if you're watching this right now and something inside you is thinking, this makes sense. If you're tired of fighting yourself, if you're exhausted by cravings, if you've tried willpower, if you've tried forcing yourself, if you know there's something deeper driving your behavior, then this may be exactly what you've been looking for. Because NSPR is not about punishment. It's not about shame. It's not about labeling yourself broken forever. It's about understanding the brain, understanding the nervous system, understanding emotional learning, and then using that knowledge to help create change. And that's exactly what I do. So people that have been through my online program would have found that there is some aspects of this in there. But now I'm doing something really exciting. I'm actually coaching people in real live time. So I do this through my one-on-one coaching and my group coaching. So inside my programs, you will learn exactly how cravings work, how to regulate your nervous system, how emotional conditioning forms, how to identify subconscious patterns, how to reduce trigger intensity, how to stop living in constant internal conflict, and how to retrain your emotional responses, and how to build genuine emotional freedom. And the beautiful part is this does not require endless struggle. Many of my clients who have been through my online program have had great success. And that program is going to be available forever. But if people are wanting faster results, that is what I do inside my group programs and inside my one-on-one coaching. So if you're ready to experience this work for yourself, you can apply for one-on-one coaching or you can join my group program. So the next cohort starts on June the 13th, but spots do fill up really fast. I only keep the groups really small so that we can really do the work together where you feel safe and supported. So if you want to get started, if you don't want to miss your spot, just go to www.rewiredrecovery.co. That's .co, not .com. And you can start actually rewiring the patterns that have been controlling your life. Not through shame, not through force, but through neuroscience, through emotional learning, through nervous system regulation, and through becoming the person your brain and body no longer need alcohol to protect. Because healing is possible and change is possible. I am proof of that. The hundreds of people that have been through my programs are proof of that. And your brain is far more adaptable than you were ever taught. All right. Thank you for being here, and I really hope to see you inside one of my programs.